Hello and welcome to True Light, a podcast about the Christian faith through the lens of the Eastern churches. My name is Landon Coleman and I'm a layman with the Ukrainian Greco-Catholic Church. On True Light, we bring the voice of the Metropolitan Andrei Sheptytsky Institute to you. Not sure about you, but our family had the unique experience of all being sick for the whole Christmas holidays. So if I sound like I am plugging my nose, I'm not voluntarily, but my nose is plugged. This episode is interesting. We had three extraordinary women talk to us. They actually spoke with my wife, Lara, who interviewed them about their being married to priests. They have all this unique experience of being in the Eastern Church and being the wives of priests, so raising families and having some sort of ministry in their parishes. And so my wife, Lara, talked to them about that experience. Before we get into that, I'm just going to mention a couple things. One, there is a store on the Sheptytsky website. There's a few sales on right now for Christmas. Please check those out. They will expire soon. Secondly, the Sheptytsky Institute has a great YouTube channel. All those Tuesdays at Sheptytsky lectures that maybe you've seen on the website, they're all on YouTube and they're very good. So please check those out. Lastly, if you like this podcast or you love the Sheptytsky Institute, please share this podcast with your friends. It may be difficult to share the depth of your faith with a coworker or an acquaintance, but sharing a podcast is not as hard. So please do. We'd appreciate it. So let's get into it. My wife Lara is going to speak first with Pany Olenka Galadza, who is married to Father Peter Galadza of the Institute. They have had a very interesting relationship and career in terms of ministry. So I will let Lara take over and speak with Pany Olenka about her experience.
Olenka, thank you for being here.
Hello, Lara.
Hello. Could you start by just telling me a little bit about yourself, your own family, and maybe the tradition of priest wives within your own family as well?
Well, all right. Thank you. I was born into a Ukrainian Catholic family. My father's parents were a clergy couple. My father's father was a Ukrainian Catholic priest, and my father's mother had come from a long line of Ukrainian Catholic priests. So it's something that is quite natural in the Eastern European and Eastern world. And my father's parents were in Siberia. They were exiled for 7 years because of their adherence to their faith. And thankfully, they survived that and were able to return to their home and to be able to live out a few more years of their elder years and to die in peace under Soviet rule, of course, but in peace. So I come from a Ukrainian Catholic family. I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, which is a bit remote from the Ukrainian Catholic world, but there was a small community there, and we grew up attending Ukrainian Catholic Church. So I was always aware that married clergy was something very natural, maybe as opposed to the frame of reference of the Roman Catholic world, where married clergy is considered to be something of something apart from the idea of what a priest is and a devoted life solely to Jesus Christ. We always understood married clergy, as it is seen in the Eastern world, as being something that actually benefits the community and supports the community. The priest's wife is not just some separate being in that configuration. The priest's wife somehow supports the priest, supports the community, depending on the individual calling of that person, of how she is to engage in her community. But it's always been a very natural aspect, as it is in most religions of the world. It is only in the Roman Catholic Church that married clergy was ceased to be practiced about the 11th or the 13th century in the Western world, and continued in the Eastern world. So anyway, a little bit of a diversion, but I was born into the Ukrainian Catholic Church.
And you mentioned briefly that you see the priest's wife as helping to serve the community depending on the role that priest has taken and which community you fall into. Can you describe your own experience and which communities you have been part of and the ways in which you have helped to serve those communities?
Okay. The idea of a role of a priest's wife is something that I don't know about that word role, because it seems to be something that is put on to oneself. I think that a priest's wife simply is a person who hopes to be and works and strives to be a good person, a person engaged with Jesus Christ, a good Christian, a good wife, a good mother, a good member of the community. So being a priest's wife, or being a doctor's wife, or being a teacher's wife, or being anyone in their role or in their lives, simply to live out your life, your vocation to Jesus Christ, and whoever you are married to, or whoever you are in your own education and vocation. So that's been something. I found that my husband Peter and I we met at Ukrainian Catholic University in Rome in the summer of 1975. We were both interested in the same things. We were interested in education about theology, the history of the church, and so on. We were attending summer courses that were organized by Patriarch Joseph Sleepy, who himself had returned from exile in Siberia just a few years previous. And we were all interested in building up our church and our relationship to God within that church. And so we met there, and we began dating. And so this idea of Peter wanting to be a seminarian and having a vocation to the priesthood was not something foreign. It just seemed so natural. It's something that I felt my own brother was a seminarian at that point. So I didn't have to put on some other role. I was totally myself and able to, actually very grateful that I could use whatever gifts God had given me to just be myself and to engage with the community. Of course, later on, we dated, we married. At that time, the Ukrainian Catholic Church was under strict censure, as it were, from the Roman Catholic Church regarding married clergy in North America. So Peter's ordination was quiet. He was ordained by Patriarch Sleepy, and so it wasn't something that was announced and so on. And thankfully, within that year, there was more of an open attitude, and the Vatican kind of lessened the pressures on the Ukrainian Catholic Church in maintaining compulsory celibacy for all of their seminarians and clergymen. And I wish to emphasize that celibacy should be voluntary. Not. It's the mandatory celibacy that our church doesn't have. We obviously honor celibacy. I mean, our own son is a celibate, right?
Yeah.
We honor celibacy, but it's an individual calling, and sometimes people can be more effective as a married team or as a married couple or even just married, to have some other support network in your life. And also compulsory the celibacy in the Eastern tradition is always seen within a community. You're either married, so you have a family community, or you are a monk and you have a monastic community. And so this is something that is very much stressed in the Eastern traditions. You have to have a support network. So later on, we served in a church in Chicago. We served in Mishawaka, Indiana, when my husband was studying at Notre Dame University. And we lived in parish housing and lived totally in sync with what the parish was doing. I found that just being supportive to my husband or just raising our children as best we could in an active community and just being present to people was something that I enjoyed, and I found that being a listening ear was very helpful. Very often it was in the baby room or in the back of the church or in the ladies' room, in the washroom when I was changing diapers or whatever, that women would come up to me and share stories that they might not have told other people, and basically ask for some kind of intercession with the clergy. And so I realized that was something very important, to have that kind of accessible listening ear. And I was also active in teaching and catechesis and so on, but I found that not everyone who is married to a clergyman is or has a gift to do that. So whatever the gift is or whatever you feel called to do is something that is important to engage in the community and to support your husband in the ministry first and foremost, and to also take it on as your ministry in whatever small or larger amount is given to you.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I know that I myself, as an entrant into this church from Roman Catholicism, I've experienced that type of supported ministry or like intercession, as you frame it, in terms of the way that I've accustomed myself to viewing the role of the priest's wife as someone who is there for the community in a similar way. Wonderful.
I'm glad.
Yeah, thank you very much for your ministry, for the ministry you share with your husband and your work for our church. And thank you for meeting with me today and talking with us.
Thank you, Laura. It's always a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Beautiful. We've got a lot of love for Olenka Galadza. Her kindness and her wisdom have been important in our lives. Next up, we're talking to Annette Hrywna. Annette lives in Windsor with her husband, Father Tom Hrywna. They serve at St. Olga and Vladimir parish there. Annette is going to give us a little insight into what it's like living out the vocation of a priest's wife in the 21st century, serving in the parish, but also earlier having married a seminarian. So I will turn it over to Annette Hrywna and Lara.
I'm sitting down now with Annette Hrywna, who is the wife of Father Tom Hrywna, and she is going to chat with me about her experience as a priest's wife. Annette, could you just give a short summary of your life so far, when you were married, when your husband was ordained, and where you guys have been serving since then?
Sure. I grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and after a few degree changes, and I completed a bachelor's degree in theology, and then I pursued a canon law degree in Ottawa at St. Paul University, and that's where I met my now husband, Father Tom Hrywna, who was in seminary at the time. He started the semester after I did. He began his degree for seminary. We met there And we were married after I finished my degree. That was in May 2014. And the following year, he completed seminary, and he was ordained to the diaconate the March of 2015, and to the priesthood May or June in 2015. It was the Monday after Pentecost. Sorry, I can't remember if it was the end of May or the beginning of June. And then we were sent to a parish, Saints Vladimir and Olga in Windsor, Ontario, that July, and that's where we are now.
Wow. Okay. So you said that you grew up in Indiana. That was not in an Eastern Christian home. Is that right?
Right. I grew up Roman Catholic.
Okay. And had you been exposed to Eastern Christianity, either Orthodoxy or Eastern Catholicism at all growing up, or was that something new that you experienced when you moved to Ottawa?
I had very limited exposure to it. My first exposure to it was in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I was nannying for a family of 7 kids at the time. They homeschooled their family. And I went on a trip to them up to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan where they have family. And they took me to the Ukrainian Catholic monastery there for Divine Liturgy on Sunday morning. And I was really shocked. I had never been exposed to Eastern Catholicism at all. I had no idea what it was. It was very beautiful, but I remember the service being very long. We were the only family there. It was just us and a few monks. And then when I went back to Fort Wayne with them after the trip, I enrolled in theology program at University of St. Francis in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And one of my professors is a Ukrainian Catholic, Dr. Adam DeVille. And he introduced my classmates and I to more of the East. We all took great interest in iconography. We learned a little bit about Eastern theology, but I think the primary thing we learned about was iconography at the time. And whenever I moved to Ottawa, I became exposed more to Eastern Catholicism, Eastern Christianity. That professor, Dr. Adam DeVille, had mentioned the Sheptytsky Institute because he completed his degree there. So I went to Divine Liturgy there, but I was randomly matched up with my roommate, Sophia Nahachowski, who is the daughter of Father Ivan Nahachowski. And so this was a really interesting experience to meet, like the daughter of a priest. I was introduced to the idea of married priests within the Catholic Church from Dr. Adam DeVille during my theology degree, but I didn't have any tangible idea of what that meant. I had never met anyone who was a married priest or certainly not the children of a married priest. So that was an interesting experience that got put into my life.
Mm-hmm. You say interesting. This can be kind of a controversial topic. Did you struggle with the idea of a married clergy at all, or was it something that happened a little more organically, that you became accustomed to the idea, or did you have big questions for your roommate? I'm just wondering what kind of mental and emotional transition happens there for you.
Since I had been exposed to the idea, I was emotionally okay with it, I guess I should say. I don't know how else to explain that. But I know I asked her some questions about it. And the struggle didn't really come until I was actually dating Tom, when I was thinking, like, I'm dating a seminarian. And sometimes I would just think, like, what? This is so strange. Because from my background, I hadn't been exposed to married priests at all. So I know when I initially told my mom, she was really shocked and didn't warm up to the idea until after she met my current husband. So after she met him, she was fine. And she and my father came to Ottawa maybe a year later, and they talked to Father Andrei Churovsky and met Father Peter Galadza. And Father Andrei Churovsky and his wife spent a long time talking to my parents about Eastern Catholicism and married priesthood. And so then they really came to understand the idea and embrace it.
Wonderful. And how about your own experience then as growing into this role? What kinds of things did you find challenging? Did you find to be a blessing? How did you kind of, and how are you growing into this person as the wife of a priest? What kinds of things, have you found challenging and to be blessings?
Certainly one thing that it's challenging is I'm not even Ukrainian and I'm married to a Ukrainian Catholic priest. And so one thing is just not knowing expectations, which can be a good thing or a bad thing at different times, because I just act on my default way of acting. And maybe there are things that I should be doing as the priest wife that I don't know I'm supposed to be doing, or, and other times it's maybe good because then I don't have to worry as much about people's expectations since I don't know what they are and I can just live. That certainly not knowing expectations has been the hardest. We did have some discussions and an online seminar, I guess, during seminary for the clergy wives and those who were engaged in dating seminarians at the time. My husband and I were married at that time, and we had this online forum with other current priest wives. And so they answered a lot of our questions, went through different challenges as a priest wife. And that I think was very helpful.
Has that kind of community support continued at all? Do you have mentors or people within the church who are also clergy wives who you can go to with your questions, or do you? Or I know that I think your parish in Windsor might be the only Ukrainian Catholic parish. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is the only Ukrainian Catholic parish in Windsor, but we are fortunate to have two other priests who live here, and both are married. One is the retired pastor, and the other one is a parochial vicar, like an associate for our parish, who he has been working in the schools and high schools as a vice principal, but now he just retired this year. So I have those priest wives that I can talk to, which is very fortunate. It's great because we each have diverse gifts. The priests have diverse gifts and the wives too. And so the parochial vicar's wife is very good at decorating, and she and several parishioners decorated the church yesterday for Christmas. And so I'm glad that, not that all priest wives have to do that role. Like, if parishioners are the ones with the gifts, they can do it, but I'm glad, that's not my gift, so I don't have to worry about it. So that's been fortunate. When we first moved here, I would often call a few priest wives that I know, one in Ottawa and one in Toronto, and discuss questions that I had or concerns that I had with them. And still, when I see them now, they ask how things are going, or ask about our lives, and I know that they're there if I have questions or anything. I can turn to them for support. So several young clergy wives that I'm close to, we often turn to each other for struggles that we may be having, and to get ideas for each other, to support each other in our marriages, or to support each other in raising children. That is something that I really value. Is they're usually online discussions in like Messenger or something like that, and several of us get together and help each other through difficult times. So, and also pray for each other. I know when things are going on. So that is something I'm very grateful for as well. Technology can be a gift because I know we're spread far apart.
Are there ways that you find yourself serving the church and the parish that you didn't anticipate kind of growing up? So you're talking about the gifts that you have. Do you find that you are called to serve in ways that surprise you just because of the fact that you are the priest's wife?
I would say my parents are very involved in their parishes. They always were when I was growing up. So the ways that I'm involved in parish, like running the parish summer camp, or I was leading the youth group for a while, or children's catechesis, those things my sister does at her parish too. So I'm not surprised really at those. I often cantor daily liturgies, or this morning I cantored the baptism. Those are things that I'm very surprised. As a child, I wouldn't have guessed, or even as, a teenager, that singing in church or leading the singing at church would be a gift of mine. But luckily the parish in Ottawa was very good. It had beautiful music, and so I was able to learn a little bit from the community there.
Cool. Thank you so much, Annette, for agreeing to join me on this and to share your experience. And I wish you all the best down in Windsor and a very Merry Christmas.
Okay, thank you very much. Merry Christmas to you as well. Take care.
Annette and Father Tom are an inspiring couple. Be sure to keep them in your prayers. Next, we talk to Kim Bombeck, who's married to Father Mike Bombeck. They serve in Lloydminster. This couple have gone to great lengths to respond to God's call to ministry. I'll turn it over to Lara.
So welcome to the podcast. I am speaking with Kim Bombeck. It's nice to have you.
Good. I locked myself in my bedroom.
Excellent. Yes, earlier Annette had to escape to her basement, and that's where I am as well. Landon's
I've only had one child try to get in.
I think that will be good for the Institute's podcast if there is an interruption from a child, to be perfectly honest. You are coming to us from Lloydminster, Alberta, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Where you're serving with your husband and your 5 children. But before we get into your current ministry, could you give us some information and background on who you are and how you got yourself into your position here in Lloydminster?
How I got into this mess. So I was born and raised in Prince George, which is like a small, medium-sized logging town in like northern British Columbia, kind of. And I was sort of raised in an agnostic, atheist home. But God had other plans for me, I guess. And I met my husband while I was going to university, and he very kindly introduced me to the Ukrainian Catholic faith. So I converted about a month before he proposed. And then we got married 6 months later, and then a year later had our first child. So he always, he was very upfront about his feelings about the priesthood and how he sort of felt a call to the vocation since he was young. But we decided that we would discern, our vocation to be married first, and we would do that first, and then together discern his vocation to the priesthood. So we had a bunch of kids really quick. But at the same time, we're sort of watching and praying about seminary, and a really great rector arrived at the seminary, and we knew we have to go now because we felt that he would be the most understanding, because there aren't a lot of married men with kids that go to seminary. So we went to seminary when my oldest was 3. So I had 3 kids, 3, 2, and 6 months old when we arrived in Ottawa. Yeah, so we were there for 3 years and moved back. And we've had 2 more kids since then. And he'll be a priest now, I think 4 years this January.
Wow. I'm curious about this because living here in Ottawa, where the seminary was, I did see a number of seminarians come through, and like you pointed out, there were very few of them were seminarian families. What kinds of challenges did you guys face? You kind of referred to the fact that they were there, but what were they specifically? How did you make that decision to go? How did you plan for it?
Well, I mean, one of the most obvious challenges is just how do you provide for your family while you're there? Mm-hmm. Seminarians are not permitted to work during their study time. They can pick up something in the summer, but providing for, which might cover, for a single man, but for a family of, what were we, 5 at that time? It's a little bit more difficult. So, and we felt that if we went and did all of this moving and changing and took on this, I don't really want to call it a cross, but when my husband was at seminary, he was very busy and he was away a lot. And we felt it might be best for him to do that when the kids were young, because they hardly remember it now. We left and came back to Edmonton when my oldest was 6. Okay. So it's just kind of like a blip on his radar, versus other seminarians that I've known that have come with older kids. Their children have really struggled with the dynamic that seminary involves. So we decided to take that risk early instead of late in their lives. Also, I mentioned financially. My husband was a teacher before he went to seminary, so we were able to save a little bit, and that sort of provided for our family. But again, my kids, because they were so young, they didn't really notice that they didn't get so many Christmas gifts, or that we didn't travel, or that they didn't have brand new clothes. All those things that, sort of teenagers might feel a little bit more. Little kids, they don't really realize what's going on. So it's a lot easier in that respect. So we decided that those sorts of challenges would be easier with a younger family. So that's why we went when we did.
Amazing. And
I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, very much so. And what I'm hearing through that too is that it's, at that point, it's not just a one man responding to his vocation. It really is, it has to be both of you going into that, no holds barred. You're taking on a lot in terms of helping with that.
Yeah, it's, I've met lots of different priest wives and families, and they, every priest family sort of lives this vocation differently. But Mike and I really felt strongly that this would be a family thing, that him and I would do this together. Because honestly, I think the best way to, get to a married priest is to go through his wife. So if his wife is upset if their marriage is not good, then his vocation as a priest is also going to suffer. Mm-hmm. So we felt like we really both had to be on the same page for this vocation in order for it to be, really successful.
And coming to this from a background that you grew up and you didn't have relationships with pastors, with their families, and then meeting Mike, you said that he kind of kept this at the forefront. It wasn't something that he hid from you, that this call to vocation. But was there a way for you to know kind of what was coming? Did you know priest families before you guys signed up for seminary? And what has your community for that been like since his ordination?
Funny, priest families are they're so funny because initially I didn't understand. I think it's kind of like marriage. Maybe I'll compare it to that. It looks really great, and you see some really good role models, and you see maybe some not so great role models in marriage, but it all looks pretty good, and you feel like you know what you're getting into, and then you go and you get married, and it might it's always totally different, right, than you expected. The challenges, the joys, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think that clergy family life is very similar to that. You sort of have an idea of what you want this to look like, and you see what another couple might be doing, and you're like, okay, I'm going to aim for that. But who knows if that's actually going to pan out. So some people gave us a little bit of advice before we went, but really there wasn't a lot at the time. And I'm very thankful that in my eparchy, the priest wives are very close. And so I now feel like I have a very strong community of women that I can get a hold of if I'm struggling with something. There's a couple other priest wives my age, and we all have like a little group chat on social media. And yeah, there's a lot of support once you're in it. But as you're sort of getting there, it's, hit and miss.
You guys are in Lloydminster now at a parish or serving in a couple of parishes?
Father Mike has 3 parishes, 2 full-time parishes and one that he visits occasionally. So he has one in Lloydminster and one in Vermilion, which is about 45 minutes west of here.
Mm-hmm. And what do you find your role has been and the role of, I guess, your family has been in those parish settings? And is it different now than it was before he was ordained?
Oh, it's absolutely different. I think my vocation as a clergy wife will change depending on my children, honestly, because certain seasons of motherhood require a lot more attention to my kids, and so I'm able to give a lot less to my parish than I would like. I'm not super involved in the Vermilion and Fidelity parishes because my children don't need to go to 2 liturgies every Sunday morning. So I don't go with Father Mike. It's hard enough to get through one. Yes. So he does Vermilion on his own for the most part, but I do cantor for them at Christmas and Easter. And then I also cantor for our parish in Lloydminster. And then I just help with, all the stuff, all the things. I think in the future, I hope to see this vocation kind of grow into a lot more ministering to the sick, to the shut-ins, that kind of thing. Pregnant women, women who are sick, places where priests have a harder time going to. Priest wives have sort of have an in that way. Mm-hmm.
Are there priest wives around who you've seen doing that kind of work?
I have seen it. A lot of the older priest wives in my eparchy have had to work to support their families, and I'm very privileged that I don't have to do that right now. So I could see if I had a full-time career that it would be a lot more difficult to minister in the community like that. But I have seen some really great role models, from Ontario and just even the United States. Some of the things that those priest wives are doing is just, it's just really amazing. So I sort of look to them for where I'd like to be one day.
Very cool. And just to wrap up, I'm curious about this, what seems to me to be a steep learning curve. I mean, I am coming into this tradition from Roman Catholicism, and am still learning a lot, but I am by no means an expert nor as involved, it sounds like, as you are in this tradition. Have you done any sort of formal learning, or is it like hitting the ground running and learning about the liturgy, the seasons of the year, the fasting, and all of the details of, being a good Orthodox Christian and all that entails? Did you know a lot about that before? Has it kind of ramped up since being in the spotlight as the priest family?
I didn't know anything, nothing, before I got into this. I think seminary, we had an amazing rector who really did his best to include us in some of that, like in the church life type of thing. Mm-hmm. And then I've had some other really good role models. some priest wives who have really mastered the art of fasting with their family, or have mastered the art of doing long liturgies with kids.
Yeah.
I find the biggest learning curve for me is that I'm not Ukrainian, so I don't speak the language, and I haven't been able to learn the language. Mm-hmm. So I cantor almost exclusively in English, and yet we have quite a few immigrant families that I struggle to communicate with and wish we could do more in Ukrainian for them. So I think that's the hardest part. Because I didn't come from a Roman Catholic background, I don't really have anything to compare this to. So I don't have to sort of unlearn any previous traditions,
mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I just come into this totally fresh. So I'm not comparing it to anything. So I think that's an advantage that I have compared to someone else who's, mixing up the different feast days with the Roman Catholics, or missing a Roman Catholic tradition that they used to do that they feel they can't do now, or you know what I mean? So,
yeah. No, definitely.
Yeah. But there's all kinds of amazing blogs and books and all kinds of stuff for learning this sort of stuff. So, and the Busy Kids magazine, I'm going to give that a little plug. I don't know if you've seen that around, but it is amazing Eastern Christian resource for families on fasting and, different seasons and that kind of thing.
Very cool. And where can we find it?
It's on busymom.com.
Okay.
Or Busy Kids magazine. If you Google that, like BYZI, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I can send you a link. You can get it's free online,
yeah.
And then it's you can order a printed version for your parish or for yourself. It's got monthly calendars of all the different feast days. It's got crafts. It's got cooking. It's got the tones. It's got everything. So.
Very cool. Great. Thank you very much, Kim.
It's my pleasure.
Sharing your story with us. And I wish you many blessings and a very Merry Christmas in this upcoming new season.
Thank you. You too. I hopefully will see you guys around soon.
Thank you for joining us in our conversation with these three women who are each of them living out their vocation as a part of a ministry couple. And I hope that you share this with any friends of yours who might have questions about married clergy, about what that looks like, the family life and all that. And big thanks to these women for being on the program. I would like to encourage each of our listeners to consider the possibility of enrolling in the MTS program at Massey. There will be more and more distance education available, so consider it. If you are enrolled in one of the Massey programs, there is still room in Dr. Brian Butcher's course, Testimony, Tradition, and Truth. Please contact him by email at brian.butcher@utoronto.ca. You can get a hold of us at youtube.com/Sheptytsky Institute, twitter.com/Sheptytsky, facebook.com/Sheptytsky. As I mentioned before, on the Sheptytsky website, in the store, there is a sale. So check it out. You can always email me also with questions, comments, fan mail at landonarcoleman@gmail.com, LANDONAR Coleman, like the stove, @gmail.com. And I will send you off with a piece from the Konovets Quartet from the new Valam Monastery, singing a verse from the Fourth Feast of Theophany.